You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up? It's Andy Kamenetzky, co-host of Locked On Lakers. Brian's going to be joining me later on in the show, but for now, really excited to be joined by Mike Richman, host of Locked On Blazers on the network. We are going to talk some Carmelo Anthony. Mike, thank you very much for joining. It's seemed like I'm not even joking, like damn near a decade, Carmelo Anthony was supposed to have been a Laker. You know, they have pitched him a couple times. You know, he and Kobe had sat down famously and like really talked through the pros and cons of them playing together. They were very, very close and ultimately decided at the time it would not have worked. But it's just pretty amazing now to have this guy with the team, you know, after so much lead up, regardless of where he actually is in his career. It's felt like something we've been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, I think we've been joking about the inevitability of this for at least since the summer of 2014 and probably before that, like at least since then. And so now it is finally here after all this time. Mello wearing the Forum blue and gold.
Yeah. So to take a look at where he is right now as a player, you begin offensively because that's obviously what he's best known for. The outside shooting numbers have become they've become really good, but they've just become a big part of his game, that 3-point shooting. How much did that develop, do you think, while he was in Portland? And were there specific strengths he has as a 3-point shooter, either, you know, catch and shoot or from specific spots, anything self-created, that sort of stuff?
You know, most of his three-point shoots, most of the three-point shots were catch and shoot, of the catch and shoot varietal. Particularly in big games, he would park in that strong side corner and he'd say, "If you help, I'm going to beat you." There was in the bubble for run for the Blazers to get themselves into the playoffs to be summarily dispatched by the Los Angeles Lakers. Melo hit huge shots down the stretch in the bubble. He was really good. And then he had an even better shooting season last year, came back and shot it even better from three. You know, that right wing is really where he does his damage, that foul line extended right wing and then down into the corners. The Blazers were terrible at generating corner threes. So the shot diet might change on a slightly different team and playing with LeBron James. But
I was going to say, it's my understanding LeBron is pretty good at finding shooters from my casual watching of this team. So yeah, this could be some real feasting times for Mello.
Yeah, the shot diet will change. But you know, a lot of the stuff that he did with the Blazers was they let Mello be Mello. They let him cook. That first season, they were really bad. They just did not have a particularly good bench unit, and they said, "Hey, no one else can score. It's not going to be Mario Hezonja and Anthony Tolliver. It's going to be you, Mello." And they just turned the ball over to him and basically said, "Bail us out." And he wasn't super efficient, but he proved he could score. Last year they were a little bit better, and when Mello had big games, they were good. I mean, it was just simple as that.
I mean, was he an X factor for you guys?
Excuse me?
Was he an X factor for you guys?
I mean, when Carmelo Anthony scored, here's a Locked On Blazers stat for you. When Carmelo Anthony scored 18 or more points, the Blazers were 14-5 because he doesn't do shit else. He scores. He scores, and he's not going to give you other stuff. Like he's not going to rebound. He's not a passer. He's sure as hell not going to play elite defense. Not in 2009, and certainly not in 2021. Like he's just not who he is or has been. But when he scored a bunch, scored in, you know, well above his average. I think he averaged about 14. When he scored 18, they won because he provided that punch for them that they needed, even on a team that was offense only for the most part.
Can he still work off the dribble and do things in ISO? Like, you know, at all? Like, is it a matter of picking spots, the right matchups, or does this become problematic in his age, sort of regardless of context?
You know, two dribbles, I think, is about where you're going to get the maximum efficiency from him. Catch, pump fake, one dribble to the side, a second dribble towards the rim, a bucket. One thing that you will notice immediately about Carmelo Anthony is that he is an ageist. If he sees a teenager on the court and that teenager happens to be guarding him, he is going to take that young man to the block. And he is going to pump fake, and he is going to use his strength as a grown adult. And he is going to, there was a stretch where he was guarded by, I forget who it was a stretch of teams though. And the second one was Sekou Doumbouya of the Detroit Pistons. And Sekou got the business because Mello says, I've been in the league as long as you've been alive. Come get this work. And I guarantee as a Laker, he will see a child and he will go get him.
What ends up happening if he looks for, say, someone of drinking age or late 20s, 30s, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't lack for confidence, so he might still get the shots up, but he is not, the speed and the strength is not there. You know, what made Melo so special when he was young was that he had this combination of being so quick, but also just big. Like, he's a big guy, and he could just monster people. Like, he could roll with LeBron James is what made him so special. And if they had been in a different draft class, people would treat Melo a little bit differently, but he's cursed by being the 03 class. But like, he playing against elite athletes, you notice that Melo has lost a step. Playing against NBA level athletes, you're like, oh yeah, he's 36, you're 18, I get it.
Okay, over the course of watching him for 2 seasons, how much did you notice defenders still treating him like Carmelo Anthony? Like, just, it's sort of wired, you know, as somebody on the court with him, you are wired to think of him as Carmelo Anthony, regardless of where he is in his career. And does he take advantage of it?
Absolutely a factor. Absolutely a factor. Is just sort of the brand recognition, respect that he gets. I talked about him kind of posting up on the strong side. If he was on the weak side, he could hold a defender on that weak side because they didn't want to mess. They didn't want to leave Carmelo Anthony. And as Damian Lillard once pointed out, there's a big difference when they're looking around on the wing and they peek behind him and they say, oh, that's Mello. Like, there is a feel to it. You know, there's diminishing returns as you get into increasingly more important games. People are not as worried about the brand. It becomes less, but during the regular season, absolutely he gets respect. That, you know, he's a 40% 3-point shooter, but he doesn't always deserve.
No, I mean, look, I covered Kobe, you know, for the last 10 years of his career, and that included the post-Achilles years. And it was still amazing to me how many opponents just could not help but think of him as Kobe, even in this very diminished, extremely inefficient, at times, frankly, ineffective version of Kobe. He's still Kobe. And the idea of not treating him as this incredibly difficult matchup that you cannot take your eyes off, you know, these habits build up over time and reputations. And, you know, Mello deserves the reputation he has as one of the best scorers ever.
Right. And I think he gets, particularly from guys who are kind of, you know, there's so many dudes in the league who grew up watching him and LeBron, and they're like, there is a certain respect they get. And I do think, particularly in the sort of low prep regular season, that you will absolutely see that same sort of Kobe effect.
You mentioned before that a lot of times his scoring can be that bellwether for, you know, the team's overall success, because, as you eloquently put it, you ain't getting shit else. As a playmaker, though, or somebody who, you know, looking to get other guys involved, how good at it is he? I mean, regardless of how often he looks to do it, do you think he's actually capable of it? And I ask just because this is a team where you're going to be looking for a lot of sacrifice, and it's also set up to be a veteran smart team. So in theory, if he was capable and willing, that could maybe be somewhere he might contribute more than he has in the past.
I think I've described it as Mello is someone who is good at passing, but he is not a good passer. Like, he is capable of making flashy, smart, quick ball movement passes, but he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't. So it's if there's a certain amount of buy-in because he's playing on this particular Laker team and he knows what's at stake, and I think the Blazer years very much changed him from an ego standpoint. But like, he's capable. There are some moments, like, you know, crazy touch passes in transition or big skips where he sees someone on the opposite side. Like, he can really pass. Like, he can make good passes. He's just not a very good passer.
Yeah, that's actually a really great way of putting it. I'm going to be really interested to see how that plays out. When we get back, I want to get into the elephant in the room with Mello, which is the defense, but also too, Mike, I want to talk with you about what you just mentioned with like the culture with the Blazers and also Mello culturally, because I think he's actually been a really fascinating player over the course of his career along these lines. So we'll get into that coming up next. Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline, the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season's in full swing. You can track all of the action at BetOnline. This week, tons of sports action on the go as always. So get all the latest odds, news, info for your sporting needs, including MLB, UFC, MMA. NFL preseason is happening right now, which means the regular season is just around the corner. So head over to BetOnline on your laptop, your mobile device. Check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get into the game. Head to the website, use your mobile device, sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using the promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, so let's get to the part that has a lot of people nervous, which is Carmelo Anthony defensively. I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being less than you might expect, 10 being good God, man, how much does he need to be hidden defensively, or how much does he have to be accounted for by the other 4 guys on his team?
8.
Like, you know what? I was expecting a higher.
The Blazers played him next to Enes Kanter, so
that's not fair to him, man.
So it wasn't like you couldn't be like, okay, well, there's 2 in the front court, let's go here, because you had to do that with Enes. Like if you're just going to be a competitive team, you have to put Kanter on the worst pick and roll option, and then so Melo they brought him into the dance a whole bunch because he would guard whoever the better pick and roll partner was. They've hidden him in small lineups and kind of let him guard like non-mobile 5s. It's not really an option with the way the Lakers are built, because that's like they got a lot of those, or at least they got a couple. So like it's a little bit challenging because he probably has to play 4, and I even think there's going to be some weird things where he plays effectively 3 on defense with the Lakers, which is going to be a nightmare. But they're a much better defensive team, like team defense. They're going to be much better than the Blazers were. So I think you can hide him effectively when the guy behind him is Anthony Davis and LeBron James, as opposed to Enes Kanter and Damian Lillard.
Yeah, I mean, teaming him up with Enes Kanter for the defensive front court, I mean, that's just straight YOLO. I mean, that's like Terry Stotts, I don't know, expressing some type of grudge that he has against Mello or something like that. I mean, that's just clearly not going to work.
Yeah, it's the only time that they were good is when they split them up, and then Terry could never figure out how to not split them up once everyone was healthy. And then, like, at some point, they only had 9 good players, and you kind of had to play them some minutes together. But it didn't work in the playoffs at all. And now both of those 2 gentlemen play on different teams.
Yeah, I mean, he's been targeted in the past in the playoffs. I mean, it's no secret. How long can Melo typically stay on the court without that element becoming really problematic?
He can play half the game. He can play half the game and be okay. I think he'd be better if he played 2 9-minute stretches, like if he played 18 minutes, and he might even play less. The Lakers.
Oh, I think he very well could play less.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers have a very different roster than what the Blazers have had the last couple of seasons. Like they have a bunch of good players. They have maybe like 11 rotation quality players. Not a problem that I experienced covering the Portland Trail Blazers was watching 11 NBA quality players. So it's just a little bit. It's just gonna be a little bit different. Like they asked more of him, so I think he would pick his spots in a way that he might not have to with the Lakers. But the idea that he's going to be like a plus defender, he's never been that. So that's like throw that out. But I think he can be competent, and if you put him with better partners, I don't think he's going to get. He's going to get rocked. Like he's still strong and he has really good hands. Like that's what you'll notice defensively with him is that he's got really fast hands, deeply slow feet, just like real slow feet. But he'll get steals and some deflections where you realize that he has defensive instincts.
So he's a guy that kind of has to reach. It's not even that he's being lazy or that he's not with the scheme or whatever. Just this is at this point where he's at physically reaching is kind of the strategy.
Yeah, like he's has this sort of this move in transition defense where he'll get back and get on the side of someone, like on their dominant hand, and he'll go for a quick strip block. And he gets it more often than you'd think, like kind of just raising his hands up real quick to catch you as you're going up, because Harden has good hands. Now you can get around that pretty quickly if you know it's coming, but I guarantee he'll do 4 or 5 of those this year with the Lakers. We're like, damn, Mello, wow, I didn't know you could do that.
Well, that's nice to hear, because I know there are a lot of people dreading what happens when the other team has the ball.
Well, I'm not giving him 5 good defensive plays over 82 games. I'm kind of setting the bar pile low here.
Well,
but it's not going to be all, if he has whatever, something like 1,700 defensive possessions, only worry about like 1,695.
You had mentioned him culturally with this team, and it was really interesting because when he came over, it was after that pretty rough time. It was with Houston, correct? And
right.
Then he was kind of exiled, and it looked like his career might be done. And Portland was this incredible rebirth for him. And from the outside looking in, as somebody who's always really liked Mello, really enjoyable to watch. What was it about, you think, him in Portland that worked so well? And what do you think it did for him as a player, as a person, all that?
Well, I think more than Portland helped. Like I said, they kind of first year let Mello be Mello. They let him cook, and Damian Lillard was a big proponent of signing Mello. Depending on who you ask, maybe the biggest proponent of signing Mello he might have been the driving force behind him joining the team. But so you had the franchise guy on board, that helps. But I think those 10 months away from when he was in exile to back. It was basically 12 months in between basketball games, but 10 months truly out of the league. I think he figured it out. If I want to do this, if I pursue this life, I can't be Carmelo that I was. There was a humbling that happened where he's like, if I want to be the guy I've been, no one wants this. I don't think if he had been willing to take a smaller role, I don't think he would have been out of the league for 10 months. But he wasn't. Like, he would have been a Charlotte Hornet or whatever the hell it was. But he wanted to start. He wanted to play. He wanted all these things. And he found that first year in Portland because they were just decimated by injuries and terrible roster construction. So he found that place. And then in this second season in Portland, he bought into, he agreed, okay, I'll take a step back. He still had guaranteed minutes and all this, et cetera, et cetera. But like that time away allowed him to find out whether he still loved the game. And he talked a lot about when he got back, rekindling his love affair with basketball. That was the big thing with him, his love affair with basketball. And I think the situation in Portland allowed him to find that love again.
It obviously, he's not going to be the central cog that he was like in his prime with Denver or with the Knicks or whatever. But what do you think winning a title, if that ended up happening this year, because that's obviously why he came to the Lakers, would mean for him personally, but also just for his career and his perception?
Well, as you know, rings are the only measurement of success in professional basketball. There's no way. The only way to have a good career and season is to win the championship at the end of it, which is 45 in Portland. But I think, jokes aside, like I think it will really.
No, it's ridiculous, but you're right. I mean, you are unfortunately correct.
I think it will really mean something to Carmelo Anthony if you consider who his peers are. Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and LeBron and Kobe Bryant to some extent. Like, these are, Kobe's significantly older than him, but a good friend. And like, all of these guys check the box. They've all done it, and they've done it in different ways. And he didn't get to do it as the guy. But I think being able to reach that pinnacle and say, I can contribute on a team that is, as a member of a really good team, I think that matters. Like, he's not going to be the end of the bench, whatever, the late career Horace Grant with the Lakers. Right. If they win the championship, I imagine Carmelo plays in playoffs. Like, I imagine he contributes. Yeah. So it will matter to him more than it would, because he was at that peak where he was an MVP quality player for 6 years where he was that good. Again, curse of the 2003 draft class, but I think it'll matter more to him than it would to sort of your average multi-time all-star.
And then last question for you. How much longer do we have to wait before Dame forces his way to the Lakers?
I don't know. It's like August 19th.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks? No, I'm just kidding.
Excellent. I'm excited. This is really, really I mean, the Lakers don't even have the tradable contracts, but Dame has a lot of power. He's going to make this work. This is exciting.
He'll just there. Yeah, he'll just end up there. No, he said on Twitter, bet $1 million. And either you read that as like it's not going to happen. Bet $1 million, you're going to lose it, or
hiding in plain sight,
insider trading.
There you go.
He's saying you want to make some money. Mm-hmm. Bet $1 million.
Yeah, I can't say it's going to happen, but I can say it's going to happen. There you go.
Yeah, listen, that's all Locked On Blazers is basically just Dame Watch. So if you enjoyed my presence here on this podcast, Dame Watch is going over on Locked On Blazers.
I covered the Lakers when Kobe went on the summer radio tour demanding a trade to anybody who would listen. To randos in a parking lot demanding Andrew Bynum got traded. Been through that. Been through Anthony Davis watch. Been through Paul George watch. LeBron James watch. Been through a lot of watches. So I sympathize with you, man. Mike Richman, he is the host of Locked On Blazers. Obviously, you want to be checking that out. Part of the network. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate the time.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, Brian will join me, and we're going to react to what I talked about with Mike and get in some more thoughts with Mello. That is coming up next. Locked On Lakers brought to you by rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you need in a traditional chain storefront. And why would you spend 30%, 50%, 100% more for the exact same parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway, dummy? You can get it for far less at rockauto.com. For example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 from a chain store. It's only $216 from Rock Auto. rockauto.com, family business. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Whether it's your classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Locked On Lakers also brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. Bars covered in 100% chocolate. They are soft, easy to chew, and they are healthy. They're great for health-conscious people, whether you're trying to lose or maintain weight, indulging in a great tasting treat. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Great for keto diets, and they taste better than ever. You got the 12 original flavors like raspberry, coconut almond, salted caramel, banana bread. New flavors like cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, cookies and cream. Perfect for someone like me who loves awesome, different taste combinations, never feeling bored like you're eating the same thing over and over. So go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. And Brian joining us right now after a long day of tending to the children, soccer practices and whatnot.
Mine specifically, it should be noted. But yes, we had soccer practice and my wife was buried. The timing of the interview didn't work. It was a great conversation though. And Mike's great. I'm looking forward to when the Lakers acquire Dame Lillard, having him back on the show.
But for real though, what stood out to you most when you heard Mike talking about Mello?
Well, I think Mello is one of the most intriguing guys on this roster because, and Mike did a great job of laying it out. Like, he's got some very defined strengths. He is the best front court shooter they've got coming off the bench. I don't think I'm missing anything. I don't think it's really that close. I mean, a guy who has really developed into a legit 40% 3-point shooter as a big forward. And so he's going to provide something for the Lakers. Certainly they weren't getting out of like Markieff Morris, for example, last year. The defense is going to be interesting. The difference between playing, like he said, with Dwight Howard as opposed to Enes Kanter are the moments he plays with
like that. Actually,
Anthony Davis
is the reason
versus
Terry Stott should have.
It was cruel. Like, you can't.
That's shocking.
I mean, Kanter is a center version of Mello when it comes to defense. It's just not fair. But the deficit. It's like a lot of the other guys that Pelinka brought in. how Frank Vogel arranges this so that the best qualities of each of these guys can be used. And in the case of Carmelo Anthony, used for 18 minutes a game, probably, or, 16 some nights, and the occasional 22 or 23, but not 25, 26, 30 like he occasionally did last season with the Blazers. That's the key to this whole thing. And I feel like if they use Mello well and they find the right lineups and they can protect him, he's gonna be, I think, as on point as he's been throughout his career in terms of doing the little things. I know you guys talked a lot about passing, making the right pass. He's a good passer. It's never really been the thing that he's been asked to do. I feel like this could be a really great fit for the Lakers. It was almost preordained that they were going to sign him. And it was one of those deals where everybody looked at it and goes, yeah, that makes total sense. The flip side is I could also see a scenario where he doesn't actually play much.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I agreed with Mike when he said that, in terms of looking at the possibility of Melo finally getting a ring with this team next year, like on one hand, I think on balance, there's going to be enough moments throughout the season, especially during the playoffs, when experience really starts to become so important that you're going to be able to say that Mello was a part of this. This is not going to feel like when Mitch Richman got that ring in 2002 with the Lakers, and he truly was just along for the ride.
Right.
It was awesome when Phil checked him in for literally the last moments of when they clinched
Dion Waiters' ring.
Right. Well, no, I mean, they wanted to pay
Mitch was on the
tribute to
team.
Richmond.
Right. Mitch was on the team.
But I could also see stretches where Mello doesn't end up playing a lot, because I do think the matchups have to work in his favor, because when they don't, they could potentially get pretty ugly.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of them. I think you could see stretches where Wayne Ellington plays a ton, and I think you could see stretches where it's like, oh, geez, I forgot we had Wayne Ellington. I think Malik Monk is poised to play a 20-minute role, and he's also poised to get squeezed out of almost any playing time at all. It's like figuring that out and keeping guys happy. It's different with Mello than it is with Monk, who's on, really took as we talked about on that show, like taking a huge gamble on himself. But I first of all, I'll say this. I want it to work.
Yep.
I mean, there are few guys around the league that I would be rooting for success and playing a meaningful role more than Carmelo Anthony. I mean, Dwight, I think, was a guy where the arc of the story was kind of cool. It was redemptive. It was a lot of things. Dwight's a little bit of a weirder dude, like on a personal level. But like Mello is, I mean, he's so deeply respected by guys around the league. I thought, that point that guys just sort of automatically guard him because he's Carmelo Anthony, was an interesting one to listen to. And just, the role he can play in the locker room, the role he can play on the floor, finding that joy that he's talked about as a bench player and coming back and using his ego to bury his ego, as he's kind of put it. I just think I want him to do well. He is one of the guys on this team that makes this group really likable. But the other thing that I think is interesting that you guys talked about is the contrast between the potential for Mello and how useful he'd be over 82 games of the regular season versus what happens in the playoffs, because that's the same discussion as there is about Westbrook. It's a different deal in the regular season, and there's incredible benefits that his energy and leadership can bring you, we're taking away the questions of fit. But then when you get into the playoffs, it's almost like the Lakers are starting an entirely new season, setting cliches aside. Like,
yeah,
I get defended, the way they get, depending on the team and the matchup, all of it could change.
I think what's different with Westbrook versus Mello is there's more unpredictability in the way Westbrook can sometimes play, and therefore, how you end up scheming for him or the effects of the scheming. At this point, Mello really is who he is, and what he's going to do on the court has become so simplified.
Sure.
There's only a couple lanes at best he's going to end up occupying. So in that sense, it feels like if Mello is largely playable throughout the regular season, basically like the idea that the matchups, if the matchups aren't too problematic during the regular season, I don't see them being problematic in the postseason, as opposed to the way when you start scheming in the playoffs with Westbrook, because he's a much more multifaceted part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
I could picture more problems coming out with Westbrook
look,
than with Mello. Mello is who he is.
My point wasn't to equate their relative importance in terms of
that's not how I took it.
I'm just, but in case, whatever. But Mello, if he's either going to be like, you know what, this matchup against, I'm throwing a team out there. This is not like scouted, but like, oh yeah, you know what, we found out in game 1, Utah is not a good setup, or we saw in the regular season, when they played Phoenix, it was hard because of those matchups to get Mello out on the floor. Look, it's the Western Conference Finals. They're playing the Phoenix Suns. Mello may play less of a role. It is the Westbrook thing is more complicated because it doesn't matter who they're playing. Russell Westbrook is going to play 37 minutes a game in those series. And so it's much more important. It's just he's one of those guys that scheming against, you could find in the wrong series. Now it shouldn't matter that much because if Melo's not playing, they've got enough depth that they, you plug in someone else and it should be fine. Again, very different than Westbrook. It's just hard to anticipate what's going to come. And, again, but he really could be an important figure in getting them through 82 games. And that matters. The regular season and how they execute it and how they do it matters. And I'm excited. I mean, I'm really excited to see Mello play, having accepted this role. The potential storyline is phenomenal. And he's a guy that I've long admired as a human. And so to see him have the opportunity, I just think it's cool.
I want to see it work too, because he's a guy that really demonstrates just how much perception matters and how much perception can be powerful enough to warp certain things that should be obvious. Like when it's not prevalent, but you will see sometimes people debate whether or not Carmelo Anthony is a Hall of Famer, which is
drives me
stupidest
insane.
shit I've ever heard in my life.
Yes, it is. That is well put.
He is an obvious lock, first ballot Hall of Famer. He is one of the best scorers to ever play this game
in the league. It is such a reflection of rings culture of, to some degree, and I don't mean this negatively towards Kobe, but I mean it more towards like if you have you either win a ring or you're useless. Like if you're not the best,
it's Jordanification that beget
the
Jordanification
of it, but that sort of Mamba thing, and which is based on the Jordanification of it all. You're right; that's a better way of putting it. But you understand what I'm getting at. Like either you are the best at something or the top whatever, or you're trash. Like Dwight Howard was a Hall of Famer before he got to the Lakers.
Yeah,
I mean, let alone the first time.
Yes,
the first. Well,
that first stint did not help his case.
Didn't help him, and he's been out in the wilderness. I mean, his numbers were better following the Lakers, I think, than some people remember until the whatever. But he was a Hall of Famer before he got to LA the first time.
But
and
perception again.
Yes, and so I want to see it work.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to see that change and. I don't know if he'd retire if he won a ring this year. He'd probably come back and play again if he could do it. But just to have that, it'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are, to be, I think really honest about this, there are elements of Carmelo Anthony's perception that he's played a role in negatively creating. Mm-hmm. And, that's stuff that you own, I think, by doing what Melo's done the last few years, which is just be more professional and honest about where you are in your career. I mean, I'm a sucker for veteran stars who find these transformations. Like the last 4 or 5 years of Vince Carter's career has been one of my
most just neat to see.
One of my favorite recent developments in the NBA over the last, 10, 15 years. Like what he ended up doing and the type of respect that he ended up generating for himself by really becoming that type of consummate team player, role player. And the last few years have been really good for Mello that way. And just, again, you want to see a career like that go out as respected as possible, as respected as it deserves. And hopefully this can play a role in doing
whether it's VC, whether it's Mello. When guys do that, it is a demonstration of they don't just love their place in the game. They love the game.
Yeah.
And like, it's not just about being a star. And some guys, I respect guys who walk away unwilling to play that role. Like, I played at a certain level. Kobe was like that. I played at a certain level and I don't want to do the other. I respect that just as
Iverson
much.
was like that.
Yeah, I respect that just as much. I also love the idea of, you know what, I'm willing to do this just because I love being around the game. I love playing it. I love being in the locker room. I love being around these guys and all of that stuff. So
then just,
with Mello, it's the point that Max Kellerman made that I use as an example. It's like, would it be great if Mello were even greater than he was? Sure. But he's one of the transcendent players of this generation. And even if we get little glimpses of it here or there, it's just one more cool thing to get to watch with this Lakers team.
Coming up next week, we're going to be looking to do more previews like this. We're hoping to get a scouting report on Kendrick Nunn and Trevor Ariza from somebody who covered the Heat. Some other cool interviews we're looking to set up. So everybody enjoy your weekends, and we will see you on Monday.